Oh, okay. Hold on. Did you guys hear that?
I think it just was the recording starting.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you just got back. It's good to
Yeah.
see you. We'll
Yeah.
have to get together again.
Yes, for sure. Especially before school starts.
When is that?
The very end of August. I think it's like August 30th. So
We
back to
have
the
time.
grind. Yes, plenty of time. Plenty of time. Um, let's see.
I'm gonna try to I'm sitting right in front of a window and it's a little bright, so I'm gonna try to manage this.
So just for everyone's heads up, Casey is currently at a training for volunteer work and like how that pertains to UCLI. So she won't be joining us today. So I'm in charge. So we'll see how this goes. But today we have Geidy Achecar joining us to talk about immigration law and her experience through law school and kind of becoming a lawyer and all of that. So Geidy, if you maybe just want to briefly introduce yourself, um, maybe tell us where you're from, the law school you attended, and then kind of how you ended up in your particular field of the law.
Yeah, I'll do a brief introduction and then it looks like I have some questions that were sent ahead of time. So I'll try to be brief on this so I can spend some time on the questions. But I grew up in the Bronx. My family immigrated from Dominican Republic. I'm Dominican and Lebanese. Growing up in the Bronx, for some people, at least for me, I wanted a way out, right? You see a lot of sort of the worst of humanity. I think you're exposed to a lot of injustice and certainly a lot of, crime and just there was a lot going on. So I came to Utah, did undergrad here, graduated from the University of Utah with a bachelor's in English, and then I attended, and then I took a break for a while. I had my first child right after I graduated from college. That was in 2003. So that child is now 18. And I took a break. I had this English degree, so I taught middle school. I always knew that I was going to go to law school, but I thought, my kids are only, I'm only going to have a newborn for a limited amount of time. So I chose to stay with him, and then taught middle school, had my second child, and then I became a single parent and decided to finally go to law school. And BYU was obviously just the best fit for somebody who still cared about balancing family life. So for that reason and many others, BYU was just an absolutely awesome experience for me. I started my career as a solo practitioner because when I graduated, there weren't any jobs, at least that I wanted. I knew that I wasn't going to go into a big firm. That wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted. The benefit of going to law school a little older was that I sort of knew myself and knew what I wanted to do. And I didn't want to live and die by billable hours. So I started my own little solo practice. I was recruited by a firm in Salt Lake. I had a case against one of their attorneys, and she was leaving their firm, and she told them, "Hey, I had a case against this girl. You should hire her." It was really odd. But I joined that firm for a short amount of time. I went to court on a different case and met an attorney from Fillmore Spencer who asked me for a meeting. I was recruited by Fillmore Spencer. And I was there for 5 years. 4 years and 11 months. And this June, I started my own solo practice. So I wanted to focus on immigration law. And I have a lot to say pertaining to that with these questions. So so that's where I've been. And I was doing a lot of domestic litigation. So divorce, custody issues, a lot of personal injury cases, but now, and of course, immigration, but now my main focus is immigration. I'm trying to sort of hold true to that and just stick to those cases.
Awesome, thanks. So I know some of the questions that we had were in regard to your experience in law school. So, and you said that BYU was kind of an obvious choice because you had children, and so you were able to focus on family life while also doing school. When you were doing the law school application process, did you apply to other law schools, or were you mainly just focused on BYU?
So that's interesting. I was going to law school. I wanted to really do environmental law. That's what I thought I wanted to do. So I found a school that I thought, would be really good for that. That was in the East Coast where I wanted to be. So initially I was going to go to this like third tier school just because I thought they had a good program and they were where I wanted to be. And a lot of these smaller third tier schools have good regional, they have good reputations in their areas, right? Um, so then I came to Utah to visit a friend who happened to be BYU law faculty at the time, and she said, you should apply here. And I guess so. I only applied to BYU law. I waited a year. I deferred at that school, waited a full year, and that because I'd missed the application process and applied only to BYU. And that was because I felt like I had a backup. I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to stay in Utah. So it wasn't like, it was sort of like, well, I have another good choice. And, if it's not BYU, I guess I didn't even consider the U. I honestly, I don't know. I can't speak to what I was thinking back then, but I felt pretty confident that based on my LSAT score and my GPA and my background that I would be able to get in. And if I didn't, then I was going to go do environmental law where I initially wanted to do it. So don't do that. Apply lots of places.
Not recommended, but it worked out for you. So that's
Not recommended. Yeah.
So going to BYU, what opportunities did you seek out while you were in law school? Like what were the jobs or positions that you had like during the summers between the different years of law school, and kind of like how did you balance that with family life and everything else that you had going on?
Yeah, so really quickly I'll talk about how I sort of what I participated in within the law school community, because I think that's really important. For me, I was a single parent, right? So this may not, be relevant for lots of you, but I knew that I couldn't study 12 hours a day, like some of the guys in particular at my school who maybe had children, but at least the ones that I knew didn't also have the responsibilities at home. All of them were married and had spouses taking care of things at home. So they could really dedicate a lot of time to, their law school education. I didn't have that kind of time. So I knew that I couldn't compete academically with them just because of time, right? It's that simple, right? But I played on my strengths. I know that I'm good at building relationships. So I was the SBA president. First, I was on the SBA, committee, and then I was the SBA president, which put me in meetings with the deans every week, right? So I had all these relationships with the deans and the professors, and I tried to help create a better culture in my law school, and I still have classmates who send me cases. I have professors who send me cases. I don't think that there's one sort of path to success. I think that you have to play on your strengths. And my strength was building relationships. So that's what I played on, right? My first summer, I actually got a paid clerkship in the appellate division of the Salt Lake Legal Defenders. Really sought after position. I was the only 1L that they hired. The other ones were from the U, and they were 2Ls and 3Ls. And the reason I got it was because of my experience before law school. I had a lot of experience in writing. I had been a freelance writer. I had published something. So they just trusted my ability to write and research. So I did that for a short amount of time, but I was commuting. I mean, it was just super complicated with my kids. So I sort of bowed out midsummer and started working for a really busy mediator in Provo. This woman had been doing mediations forever, and it was crazy, right? I did it because it was paid and it was close, but working for her allowed me to sit inside these mediations, right? So I'd go, she didn't understand technology. She was in her 80s then. She's still mediating in her 80s. She's amazing. So I went room to room with her, typing up stipulations, right? And I'd watch this attorney advocate for their client. And then, and I wasn't saying anything. I was just listening, writing. And then I go into the next room and hear the other side of the story and watch how that attorney was advocating. And I learned family law because it was the same statutes over and over, right? I learned who were the good attorneys, there were times where I'd be like, well, why isn't that attorney speaking up? He doesn't have to let his client agree to this, right? So that was, I didn't expect it to be the education that it was, and when I was practicing family law, lots of more veteran attorneys would ask me all the time, hey, what do you know about such and such attorney? How does he approach cases? Because I'd had this sort of like inside scoop into the practitioners in Utah County, because I just sat through all these mediations and I really learned family law, which I never intended on doing, right? But it was a real skill that was amazing, because guess what? There's always work in the area of family law. So when I started my own practice, I could just take cases right away because I knew how to do those. So it just turned out to be great. My second summer, what did I do my second summer? I clerked at Esplin Way. I did some criminal defense. I can't remember too well, but I think I do remember doing Esplin Way, and I still have a relationship with those attorneys till this day, and they refer immigration cases to me.
That's awesome. So I know you said playing on your strengths is something that's important, and I think that's true of any field, right? That you should play to your strengths and make yourself look like a viable candidate for whatever position you're going for. And obviously relationships with other attorneys and mentors and things like that are really important. And so that's awesome that it's something that's a strength for you, and that you were able to work with. What advice would you maybe give to someone, even if that is one of their strengths? Like, what advice would you give for building relationships and kind of networking in law school and beyond?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? Because I guess I recognize that it's not everyone's strength, right? But let me first make a point about that. Not every lawyer, right, needs to be like the best at relationships. Like, if what you really want to do is work at a big law firm, I mean, you're not going to talk to clients. You need to love writing and research, right? You need to be able to sit down and work for a long period of time. And we need attorneys like that too, right? I would just say, obviously, find what your strengths are and try to find the right sort of, position, environment for that. But obviously, right, everybody needs to work on interpersonal skills and networking and all those things. And I would just say, I would say educate yourself, right? There's a lot of books out there that have helped me. I did something called Leadership Academy with the Utah Bar, and we read a lot. They made us read a lot of books because, books help. So how to make friends and influence people, things like that, of that nature. So I would say first, really like sort of study it, right? And hear what the experts say, because there are just easy things that you can learn to do in communication, right? Like even just saying a person's name when you talk to them. But I would just say, be interested, be curious about other people, right? Everybody wants to talk about themselves. Ask questions, ask follow-ups, get curious and get involved, right? Serve on committees, like go outside of your circle. I was friends with the dads, I was friends with the married ladies, I was friends with all the single people. I talked to the deans. I think I think you just have to do it and practice and put yourself out there. But the most important thing is to, if it's really a skill you struggle with, go learn, right? Like go educate yourself about it, practice, like, but also, right, just like, you know, be curious. And that goes across the board in your life. Just be curious.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And one of the questions that I believe Casey sent you is kind of along the same lines. It's what advice would you give for law students and new attorneys who want to get involved in legal organizations or just the community in general? So I guess maybe for individuals, most of us, I don't think, have gotten into law school yet or are even sure if that's what we want to do. So I guess even for us too, like what advice, I mean, we're obviously all part of UCLI, so we're getting involved already, but for people who want to get involved in these organizations, like how, like what's a good way, I guess, to reach out to those organizations to become a part and to get involved?
Well, I guess let me just turn that real quick on you. How did you hear about UCLI? You know?
Yeah, so I heard about it through one of the classes I took at BYU. My professor sent out an email saying that they were looking for interns. And so I emailed Melinda, who was the former executive director, and then here I am.
So yeah, so right, I think a lot of opportunities will just come from professors and your educational experiences. But again, everything that I'm doing that's interesting has been some relationship link, right? Like I was classmates with Kristen Olson, who was one of the founding, founders of UCLI. We were good friends in law school. I Some other things are really random. I will say this, once you start putting yourself out there, it's sort of a snowball effect and people just hear about you. So I was appointed to the integrity conviction unit. So Utah County attorney calls my firm that I was at and asked to speak with me. And I'm like, what does he want with me? Like, what's going on, right? Like, I'm not even doing criminal cases right now. And we have this conversation and he's like, yeah, I've heard about you, your background, blah, 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 read up on me on the website. And I was subsequently appointed to this integrity conviction unit, which is pretty cool. It's a 9-member unit. We get to review cases, to see if these convictions, I mean, it's good, interesting work, but that just came about because eventually people just talk about you, right? If you're involved. So I would say go in wherever you can, whatever organization, ask questions, ask your mentors, right? You're all going to have mentors, right? And always look for mentors. I still have people that I consider to be my mentors, right? It never, there's always somebody who knows more and is more connected and, is a few steps ahead of you in the career. So look to those people, ask them questions, get involved, and then it'll just come.
Awesome, thank you. So you mentioned a couple of the committees that you're a part of and organizations. Do you feel like your involvement in those different things, like even your involvement with UCLI, do you feel that it has like maybe changed the way you approach the law, or just more generally, how has it impacted the way that you approach your actual practice of the law?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I thought about this question because it was one of the ones that, that I got ahead of time. And there are really two ways that I guess I would focus on. First of all, this job is not easy, right? The law is not easy. It is emotionally exhausting. It is mentally exhausting. And if you're going to be in it for the long haul, you're going to have to figure out how to do some self-care and how to, center yourself and things like that. And nothing has been more effective in giving me fuel to do my hard job than service, right? Like, it sounds like such a cheesy response, but truthfully, the coolest things, the things I love about what I love the most about my job, besides the clients, and obviously the impact that you can have in their lives, like, is the stuff I get to do because of my job. Because I'm a lawyer, people trust me, right? They put me in these positions, whether it's to speak to a group of young people, whether it's to do a presentation for a school district, or serve on a committee, or whatever the case may be. That's every single time I do this. Free legal clinic with Timpanogos Legal Center. I did it for years, one Tuesday a month. And I would dread it every time, because I would be out of there like at 9:30 at night, right? Like, it was just long and tiring, and my kids are home alone, like at the time. But every single time I went, I met a person. I was like, dang, like, that person, like, I helped that person, right? Like, service gives you the fuel, it feeds you, and it helps you sort of to have that inner, all the things that you need to do this very hard job. So I know it sounds cheesy, but it's true, right? I think the second thing would be surprising to a lot of people to hear. And I think it's that, especially working with UCLI, UCLI is about diversity and inclusion, right? It's about advocating for those who haven't had opportunities. I've actually learned to advocate for myself, right? UCLI has made me more bold. And it feels also like when you're involved with like a place like UCLI, I feel like, this is hard to articulate, but like, if I have a crazy experience, I just had a really weird experience. Somebody, I left to do my own practice, and this firm called me and they're like, we want to hire you. We heard you're kind of like, I'm like a free agent now, right? It's like, we want to hire you. And I'm like, I'll take the meeting, because I take every meeting, right? And the things that this person said in this interview were wildly offensive. And he didn't think he was being offensive. One of the things that he said to me was, wow, your English is impeccable. And I was like, man, like, does he think I took a different bar exam than he did? Like, was there a different track at BYU for immigrants? Like, it was so, and he probably didn't mean anything by it, right? But it feels like, where before I'd have an experience like that and I'd be like, well, it's fine, it's whatever, UCLI has emboldened me in some ways, because I'm like, oh, okay, like, that person has some serious bias. They may or may not be aware of it, but I know that I should put myself in a situation and expose myself to that, So it's weird how it's helped me advocate for myself, and it's empowered me, because I feel like I have this group of people, and that's not the goal. The goal of UCLI is not to help me personally, but it has, right? When you're advocating for others, you're like, wait a minute, like, that's why I left the firm where I was, right? Like, I was like, oh, there are some things here that aren't exactly what I want for my career. So I'm gonna go take this leap, because that's the essence of UCLI, is we're saying, look, there's a place for you here, and make it what you want it to be, right? So I would say that service is key, and that whatever organization you're in, its aims, its focus will eventually seep into your own life and help you.
Thank you for sharing that. You kind of spoke to this in that response, but one of the questions that Casey sent you, that I don't know if you remember or not, but one of the interns asked, have you noticed people treating you differently because you are a minority lawyer, and how do you deal with that? And so you spoke to that a little bit, but maybe if you just want to like expound on that, especially in Utah.
Like 100%, like 100%, yes, right? And it sucks, and it's surprising, right? Yeah, so I think as a woman, you're treated differently. I think as a minority, you're treated differently. Sometimes you're treated differently because you're young. Sometimes you're treated differently. There's a lot of different biases out there, and there's a lot of ways that people can sort of mistreat you. yeah, like all I can say is that there's power in being underestimated, right? Because when people don't expect a lot from you and you do your job and you do your job well, I've walked into courtrooms before, into cases where the attorney just sort of counted me out, and I presented super strong with a lot of knowledge about my particular case and the case law or whatever the case may be. And I've prevailed because they didn't expect much from me, right? So in some ways you can use it to your advantage. But yeah, no, people definitely will treat you differently. How do you deal with that? You prepare, you work hard, you make sure that I don't I don't need passes because I'm a woman or because I'm a minority. I'm gonna prepare and I'm gonna work super hard, and then I'm gonna sort of earn respect, right? And then there are those who won't give it to you anyway. And I think, you just learn to walk away from those situations. There was an article in the ABA about how minority women leave the law at a much higher rate than any other group. And I'm telling you, like, yeah, because it's hard and people don't always treat you fairly. But yeah, you build a community around yourself. I have so many female friends that are lawyers. I have so many people who support me and vouch for me and go to bat for me and put and trust me with things. And so you surround yourself with good people too.
This isn't,
Advocates, allies.
yeah, this isn't a question that Casey sent, but um I'm just a little curious, like, do you feel a personal responsibility to educate others about like their treatment of other people, like of women or of minorities?
I don't. And I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know. I just don't think that that's my burden to bear, right? Like, I just don't think that it's my job to go in and tell this guy all the ways that he was, insulted me, or in all the ways. I don't, and I don't think it's fair to put that on minorities. Like, it's not fair. We shouldn't have to go do the work for you and tell you, like, no, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And maybe, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and that's definitely a fair response. So maybe now getting a little bit more into the law that you practice. You mentioned that you wanted to be an immigration lawyer. What was kind of your motivation for wanting to practice immigration law?
I mean, I'm an immigrant, right? Like, I had a green card at one point. I'm naturalized. I had to go do the citizenship test, and I had to file the applications and go to the interviews. Like, I was in that world, and man, immigrants get taken advantage of in this country like crazy. And I also have terrible clients that are immigrants that are, it's not to glorify one group or whatever, but no, I mean, I think it's just like, how could I not be interested in it, right? I lived it. It's a lived experience, and I wanted to do it the right way. I wanted to help people and be honest, and give them an empathetic ear, I guess. And it honestly makes the work easier.
Yeah, having a personal investment definitely, I think in anything, gives lots of motivation to give it your all and
Yeah.
really do your best. One of the interns wanted to know how you deal with the emotional aspects of being an immigration lawyer. And I think you've spoken a little bit about one of your favorite parts of practicing the law, and maybe not necessarily just immigration law, but the law generally, is getting to interact with clients and creating those relationships. And so I guess kind of in attachment to that, so how do you deal with the emotional aspect, but also how do you deal with losses in the courtroom?
I mean, I will say this, I'll speak to the losses in the courtroom first. it's funny. They're devastating. Well, I'll say this, in immigration law, you expect losses. So what I like to do in immigration law is I actually like to prepare my client before we even walk into an individual hearing, which is like a trial in immigration court. On a whiteboard, I lay out, this is the burden. This is what we have to prove, whether it's exceptional and unusual hardship or whatever the case may be, right? Persecution, whatever. And this is how we prove it. You can show it by this thing and this thing and this thing and that thing. And I say, what evidence do we have for each of these things? I let them sort of tell me. And I ask them, do you think we have a strong case based on this? And most of them are like, wow, I can see where my case is weak. And so usually in immigration court, you know exactly why you're losing. So, and it's just the laws are bad. This is a good thing about immigration law is that it's not personal because you're going up against the government. So it's like, it's just that the laws are bad. That judge could want to approve my client. The laws suck. So losses in immigration are different, but in other cases, the thing about losses is that as awful as they are, man, do they teach you. There are mistakes that I made in the beginning that I will never make again. I am the expert on that rule because I didn't know such and such thing. And what you need to remember about losses is that literally every attorney has them. It is impossible that everybody gets blindsided. Everybody, like, there's no way, right? Everybody has them. And most lawyers feel like they don't know what they're doing. I mean, 20 years in, I've heard lawyers say to me, I'm not sure I know what I'm doing. I just take it one day at a time, one case at a time. So I think perspective is important, knowing that, look, losses are part of it. This is literally how we learn. It sounds cliche, but it's true. I will never forget my losses and the lessons that came from it. Again, community. You have to surround yourself with community. Right now, I'm a solo, but I have at least 3 immigration attorneys that I'm constantly texting with, right? We commiserate, we talk through things, so lots of ways. And also, as lawyers, we really gotta focus on personal care. Self-care is important, having balance, getting your life right, without that, you're doomed in this career.
Yeah. What are the toughest problems and decisions you handle? I guess that's probably maybe changed a little bit now that you're not affiliated with Fillmore Spencer, but maybe you can speak to your experience with them and then also kind of this next chapter in your career.
Well, sure. And I think is this relating to my cases or is this relating to, there's lots of problems and tough decisions, right? I think in cases, I don't know that there are tough decisions for me. I don't take cases. If somebody doesn't have a strong asylum case, for instance, I'm not going to take the case because I don't feel right about taking their money. So it's just, I don't put myself in a position to make hard decisions. I take immigration cases that I believe in. Toughest problems and decisions. I'll say this. Right now, what's really tough as a solo practitioner is really sticking to my goal of being an expert in immigration law. I've had so many people approach me for personal injury cases, domestic cases, and there's money to be made there, but I'm walking away from it. So that's tough. It's tough to sort of put your foot down about what you want to do and stick with it. It's very, very easy to let some partner dictate your career or money dictate your path. That's tough. For me, I've gotten to a place where I'm like, no, my goal, I am just focusing on this thing, right? And I'm going to sort of walk away from money and opportunities. So that's tough.
Yeah, that's definitely not an easy choice. And I think it speaks a lot to your character. I just, as a person and as an attorney, to be able to do that and do something that you really care about and to make a difference for lots of people. Is there anything that you wish you had known maybe like before law school or before different positions that you've had during your career, or even before deciding to leave Fillmore Spencer and go solo?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Um, yeah, so many things. I think one of the things that I feel really like I really kind of knew what my path would be. I didn't know what my sort of like what area I would practice in, but I knew that I would do a small firm. So for me, it's like I would say, I guess the most obvious to me is that it's better to become an expert in a certain area. That's just my personal opinion, right? I wish that I had from the beginning just set out and said, no, I'm only going to do immigration and I'm going to specialize, and sort of I wish I'd known that I could draw really hard boundaries about my own career. Sorry, I had to like work through that. But like, I wish that I had known that it's, if you go to a big law, if you're going to do big law, it's not in your hands. You're going to do what your partner gives you. But in a lot of other situations, and in the beginning, obviously, you just have to kind of learn and do a lot of different things. But there's going to be a point in your career where you can sort of draw boundaries and say, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to focus on. So I wish I'd known that. I wish that, actually, I really wish that I had known. I don't think I was prepared for, they say law school is hard because it mimics practice. Law school is easy compared to the practice of law. But some people say, law school is miserable. So for me, it was the opposite. The practice is hard. So I think you really have to, don't go to law school on a whim. Go to law school if you really have a passion for it, because it's hard. It's going to demand a lot of you, especially in the beginning. I'm now 7 years out of law school, and I'm finally to a place where I'm like, okay, like I know what I'm doing, and, I can sort of be chill, but it was hard. It's hard. I wish I had known that, but I'll keep thinking about that because I know there are other things. I'll keep thinking about that one.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of times in my experience with like the lawyers that I've spoken to, and honestly people in other professions as well, people sometimes, I feel like one of the most general responses is like, I wish I had known like just how challenging it was going to be. And I think that we have a really unique opportunity at UCLI to kind of really get that perspective. Like you really need to be prepared to give it your all and like really be passionate about it, so that it's not something that's so taxing that it just completely takes over your life. And also the self-care tips are definitely
But I have to say, there's another point to this. The flip side of that too is that I wish I had known how many incompetent attorneys there are out there, right? Because I went through law school feeling like an imposter, right? Like, do I really belong here? Like, and I was like into my 30s, I'd had a career, I had like, and I was super like insecure, like, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? What I wish I had known is that this is good. I'm so glad you said that, because it really triggered this memory. What I wish I had really known is that your voice, as from whatever place you're coming from, whether your diversity is, whether you're a woman, whether you're just from a place that's really unique, maybe you grew up on a farm, or whatever the case may be, like maybe you're disabled, maybe you're a minority, whatever the case may be, your voice is necessary in law school and in the practice of law. It is critical to have diversity. And I wish I had known that not only is there a place for me, but like people want to hear what I have to say. Like I'm valued, right? Some people are going to treat me poorly and say stupid stuff, but no, like that's another thing I think as young people you need to know, is that like, don't be entitled, but certainly know that like you have something to contribute. no, there's no attorney out there that's any more special than any of you, right? All we did is we did this program, we took some tests, we've done it one day at a time, but don't, it is hard, but there's a place for everyone, and everyone is struggling. Every attorney feels sort of like, oh, this is, what am I doing? Every attorney makes mistakes. So don't make it this like mountain that is insurmountable either, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but I brought this up when the last time that we met, and I just wanted to share it with the group because it's something that I loved. So Geidy and I met in the spring. She was assigned to me as a mentor at UCLI, and we met via Zoom, and we were just kind of talking about like my personal like desires and wants and like aspirations within the law, and then just kind of like generally of other people at UCLI. And we talked about kind of like feeling that imposter syndrome and like wondering like, am I good enough? Do I belong? And kind of all this stuff. And Geidy said, like, just go for it, because like you just might be the person who can do it. And like you just might be the person that a certain individual needs in any aspect of the law. Like you are the one that they need to fight their case. And that's just something that's really stuck with me and that I really appreciated as currently an aspiring law student, but hopefully someday an aspiring lawyer. So I just really appreciated that. And thank you for those thoughts, Geidy. That's really good. So this is a question that I'm really interested in hearing your answer to. And I think it's an interesting question from one of the interns. They asked, how do you put yourself in a position to make a difference and be a role model for other people?
Gosh, like I don't think I'm a role model, right? I don't think that I'm like some kind of, I just think that I am service minded, right? And so whenever I meet a young person who has aspirations, I'm like, tell me more, right? Like, tell me why you think you can or can't. Tell me why right? And so I just try to be curious and encourage others and serve in any capacity that I can. I mean, yeah, I mean, you just do the work. I don't know. That's kind of a hard question to answer. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's hard to maybe think of yourself as like someone
Sure.
that people look up to. I don't know if that makes sense, but you are someone that people look up to, so keep doing what you're
That's so
doing.
nice. That's so nice. No, but it's interesting because I think that the only reason that a lot of people, like my mentees or whomever, like all it is like I think I'm pretty honest about what was hard for me and my struggles and like my insecurities, and I think it's just the more honest you get about your real lived experiences, the more relatable you become, right? The more you can, because we're all just, every single one of us is just dealing with the same insecurities at the end of the day, right? Like, am I good enough, right? And so I think I'm pretty open and vulnerable and curious. So I think be open, be vulnerable, be honest, and be curious about other people. And for goodness sakes, like be the kind of person who creates opportunities for people. They say that there's two types of mentors: people who will talk to you and people who will talk about you. And you need people who will talk about you. You need, when I'm sitting with a friend and she says, hey, I'm looking for XYZ, for me to say, actually, I have a mentee who's perfect for that, right?
That's awesome. Thanks. So kind of reeling back into more like your practice of the law, a couple people asked and were curious about kind of like just like the day-to-day functions and kind of like what a day in the life of an immigration lawyer looks like. And maybe also if you want to touch on what a day in the life of like working at a firm was like, because I'm sure it's very different working for yourself versus working in a firm with other attorneys.
Yeah, the only difference, and I'll go into that day to day, the only difference in working for yourself is that you're also running a business. So there's administrative things that I'm doing, right? I'm paying bills, I'm, doing accounting for now. I'm doing all of that myself. So that's really the only change when you're a solo practitioner. By the way, most attorneys are solo practitioners. And I think that's because, just a tidbit here, that's because, you think of a dentist and they need equipment, right? They can't practice without a bunch of equipment, or a surgeon or whomever, but like our tools, it's our brain. We can work from anywhere. So I just say that because I feel like people really limit themselves and they think they have to be stuck in bad situations. But anyway, that's a different question that wasn't asked. Day to day depends, right? I do a lot of consultations. So I'm on the phone a lot. Sometimes they're via Zoom, just basically answering questions. I do some marketing, whether it's on social media or really right now, that's the main marketing that I do. But marketing also includes speaking at an event, right? Like, so I do some of that here and there. I'm reviewing packets. So whether I'm doing an adjustment of status, an asylum case, or anything that's being filed to USCIS, I review with my client. So I'm reviewing a lot of forms. Sometimes I'm filling out the forms myself. I go to a lot of interviews for citizenship or for marriage-based green card interviews. So I'm up in Salt Lake at USCIS. Sometimes I'm in immigration court. In immigration court, there's only two types of hearings. There's master hearings, and that's calendaring, like filing things. And then there's individual hearings that are trials, basically. So I'm either at master hearings or individual hearings. Sometimes I'm reviewing a client's past history just to see if they qualify for certain benefits. So I'm going through immigration records, I could get a file this big on a person's history. But yeah, so there's courtroom, sort of, it's immigration court. There's courtroom, there's administrative, like CIS stuff. And then there's just talking to clients. And most of my days, right, I'm just like talking my clients off a ledge, I swear. Like, everything will be fine. Here's why your case is good. And here's why you're going to be fine. And I'm really, I believe strongly in educating my clients. So I don't just lead them along and say, this is just what we're doing. I say, this is the process. This is why we're doing this. This is what's going to happen now. Here's what's going to happen next. Here's what comes after that. So that they know exactly. I give them like the bird's eye view of the process. So I do a lot of that, a lot of educating clients.
How many clients do you like take on at a time? Because you mentioned that with immigration cases, you are pretty I can't think of a better word other than picky right now, but
Yeah.
you're selective. That's more
Right.
professional. You're selective of the cases you take, and you take cases that you really believe in. So like, do you have a cap of how many clients you'll take, or kind of what's the balance of that workload?
So yeah, that's a great question. At Fillmore Spencer, I probably had 150 cases, right? At any given time. Not all of them are active at the same time. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but that's kind of the average. When I came on my own solo, I only brought on the active immigration cases. So I brought on probably 50 cases. Right now I can manage that because they're not all on the same stage, right? Some are just waiting for interviews. Some I'm filing papers on. So I don't know what my cap will be because I'm kind of revving up my marketing again. I mean, my hope is just to have a huge immigration practice and have associates under me that want to handle different kinds of cases. One person loves to go to court, one person loves to, do asylum cases, whatever the case may be. But, for right now, I'm limiting the amount of removal cases I'll take, removal defense, people in the system and deportation proceedings. I don't do employment-based immigration. I actually wish I did, but it's just something that I never learned, and I don't really have the time to learn to do it the right way. So I don't do any of that. I don't do a ton of student visas and things like that, but any family-based removal defense, I do a lot of fiance visas. Um, yeah, I do a lot of asylum cases. So yeah, I don't have a cap right now. I don't know what that is yet, as a solo, but we'll see.
Yes. Um, what do you think are the best and worst parts of immigration law? And is immigration law something that you would recommend to someone who's kind of like thinking about going into that type of law? And like, why or why not would you recommend it?
Such a good question. Though the best part of immigration law is that when you do it right, when you can help somebody, the effect that you have on their life is generational, right? If you help somebody get papers, and they can stay in the country, that's going to affect their children and their children's children. And so it's huge what you can do. It's life changing, right? I mean, you have to think that these people, just look at the world around us, right? Like what they're escaping for the most part is pretty bad. So giving someone the opportunity to pursue their American dream is amazing. I'm living my American dream, right? It's amazing. The hardest part is that immigration laws change a lot. It is a moving target. A lot. I mean, you saw that a Texas judge blocked DACA, last week. It's like we just went through this roller coaster and now we're here again. And now we're just kind of waiting on the DOJ to file an appeal. And it's this constant, like ever changing thing. At the same time, immigration laws are terrible, outdated. So you're dealing with, and it's essentially it's administrative law, right? You have thick code, you have a lot to wade through. Like it's very, very complex. So the hardest part is that, well, so I like it because it's intellectually challenging, whereas I don't think family law is. But that constant change makes it super, super hard. Like that's a part of my day, reading through the listserv. This decision just came out. This thing just happened. Hey, what's going on at the Salt Lake office? At my interview, this and this thing happened, So there's a lot of just studying the rules and the law constantly. And that's hard. That's really hard. I could probably do that 8 hours a day, right? Like there's just not enough time. So that makes it really hard. And man, I think if you care even a little about immigration law, it's interesting. The impact is huge. The losses hurt more, but they're not personal, right? Like the law is bad. Sometimes people lose because they have incompetent attorneys, but most times they just lose because the laws are bad.
So is it something that you would like definitely recommend to law students who are thinking about kind of going into that field?
Well, sure. Like if you love people, if you have a passion for, immigration, yeah, 100%. 100%. If you don't ever want to go into a courtroom and you just want like the easiest law job ever, do wills and estates, seriously. Do yeah, but it's not for everyone, but if you have any interest in it, I would say pursue it. It's so interesting.
How much time would you say, I'm not sure what the best like time frame, maybe like annually or even monthly, would you say you actually spend like in the courtroom?
Well, that changes, it depends on how many removal cases you have and all that. I mean, I know lawyers who are in court every week, several times a week. Right now, I'm not in court that much. I'm at CIS a lot more. I'm at doing more interviews and things like that, just because I was at a firm where all the removal cases were handled by someone else. So the cases I brought on, there's only 2 or 3 that are removal ones. And I took them because they were my clients for other things, whatever. But it just depends on your caseload. You could also just be someone who does immigration and never goes to court.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
So we have about 5 minutes left. Does anybody want to pop a question in the chat or have questions that they would like Geidy to answer?
Was someone interested in maybe knowing more about personal injury, like, or, because I saw a question about tort law, about damages suffered. Is there someone here who wants to hear about maybe that's not immigration related? Obviously, ask immigration related too.
I'm curious if maybe, because we have a couple interns that weren't able to make the meeting, but we are recording this and we will be posting it on our YouTube. So maybe if you just want to address that, so that they can have their questions answered.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess they're talking about personal injury, right? Because that's what was one of my practice areas. Basically, there's two types of damages in personal injury cases. There's general damages and then there's special damages. Special damages are easy to calculate because they're your bills, your lost wages and things like that. General damages are a little more complicated, right? They're pain and suffering. And those are hard to compute. So that's a hard question, but I did want to sort of touch on it, that that's sort of where the money is in most of those cases, right? Because maybe someone lost a finger and they work with their hands, how do you calculate that loss? I mean, you have to sort of do an analysis of what they can earn over the rest of their life and things like that. So there's just, it's a big question, but essentially if they just wanted sort of a basic information about personal injury, and let me just say this, with any area of the law, you will just learn on the job. Law school doesn't teach you the law. It teaches you how to think like a lawyer, right? And so most of your training is going to happen on the job. You'll learn these things, unless you're crazy enough to start as a solo like I did.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming today, Geidy, and for meeting with us and sharing about your experience. Would you be all right if we shared your contact information with the intern so that they can reach out if they have
100%.
any? All right. So if you guys have any questions or anything, I will send out Geidy's email to all of you. Thank you so much for coming and for talking with us. And yeah, just thank you
you
so
guys
much.
for listening. It's
We
good to see you.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out a time to catch up.
Yes, I'll text you.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Thanks so much for having me.